All right, friends, today I'm going to do it. I'm going to jump in with both my feet on a work that I should probably never say anything about because it's so massive and immense. It's the end-all be-all of everything that's ever been written and everything that ever will be written in many scholars' minds. It is the standard held up for all of literature and maybe for all of writing. And it is, by all accounts, from everything I've read and studied and done, the end-all be-all of all writing. And it is Hamlet by William Shakespeare. Not only is it the standard in theater, but it's the standard in literature and in poetry, and probably in novels and other works as well. Every writer has to stand up to this great monument that Shakespeare has laid down on paper. There is far too much that has been said and that will be said for me to even begin to to be a drop in the bucket and influential in any way, shape, or form. But what I want to say about Hamlet today, for all of us non-scholars who just want to learn and who want to understand history and what's been said and what's been done, I want to say that Hamlet is something that you probably have to attack sooner or later. There are so many works that reference Shakespeare in general and Hamlet in particular that there are many things that you won't get in later works if you don't have a Hamlet reference point. And, you know, there's a funny little saying about Hamlet that a woman was given Hamlet to read, and when she returned the book to her friend, she made the comment, "I don't understand what the big deal is, it's just one long string of quotes." Of course, what this means is that it is just that important, it is just that popular, that it is literally one long string of quotes. There's a few things that may have made all the difference for me in getting more out of Hamlet. There's a lot of kind of very, I don't know if I should say highfalutin or above my head or far too analytical commentary and opinions about Hamlet and maybe about Shakespeare in general that that I don't get, that I'm not at that place yet, and maybe I never will be. But from the standpoint of having this reference point and understanding later works, and really, if it is in the West one of the, you know, next to the Bible and other works that have been as influential as Shakespeare and Hamlet, if it is that important in our culture, I just think at some point that we really have an obligation to interact with it. So I do think everybody should read it. And I have to say that there is a lot there to learn and a lot to think about, really, and a massive impact on our later culture and on the Western way of thinking that Hamlet brings to the table. It has been performed ever since it was first published, and of course continued to be published and continued to be read. And so why? You know, what is the big deal about Hamlet? It's the layers of it. It's that there's more there every time you return to it. It's that you thought that there was something about it that you got, and then you read something or heard something, and you never even considered that, and it has a lot of merit. It's the complexity of his character. It's the different vantage points that it can be looked at from. It's the validity of different perspectives and opinions about it, both equally affirmable in the text. You mean two different people who have completely different worldviews or ways of thinking can go to Hamlet and have an opinion about one of the characters or the plot or its meaning and validate it by what's there, and so can the person on the other side of the table. So it's so diverse. You can swim in it and never get air again. And so it is necessary to interact with at some point. And let me tell you a few of the things that have really made a big difference for me in reading this almost monumental work. First of all, a simple plot. You're in Denmark. Hamlet is the Prince of Denmark. Hamlet has been away at school and has been called home because his father died and his mother remarried within 2 months his uncle, his father's brother. He came home for the wedding and the funeral, first the funeral, then the wedding, and he's very angry about it. He's very angry, especially at his mother, and he hates his uncle. Now, one of the things that I didn't get earlier on, a few years ago, when I was first reading Hamlet, was that he wants the throne. And one of the things that you have to know going into Hamlet is that he wants the throne. And it's not just, he's angry with his mom, he thinks that their relationship, her marriage to his uncle is very hasty, it shows a lot of disrespect to his father, he considers it somewhat incestuous, and he is angry that his uncle married her so quickly, denying him the throne. And many of the things he does are motivated by trying to have it all. He wants to get the girl, revenge his father, and get the throne back. And when he can't accomplish all those things, then he's continually frustrated. Now, some scholars on one end talk about, well, he doesn't ever take any action. It's his inaction that's the problem. He just needs to act. And then others say, no, actually he's acting all the time. He just does the wrong actions. And then others say, no, he actually is very thoughtful and taking the right actions at the right time. Well, he is rash too. But he takes actions based on this goal of, I'm going to have it all. I'm gonna get it all. Now, of course, he's in love with Ophelia, and he wants to be able to marry her, and he wants to get the throne back. And he's got to revenge his father, because the first scene is all about that these men are up on the watch and they have seen this ghost for two nights in a row, and it really looks like the king, and he's got a crown on. It looks like the old king, and so they decide that they need to bring Hamlet in, and he needs to meet with the ghost, and so he does, and the ghost says, in fact, yes, I am your father's ghost, and I was murdered by your uncle by putting poison in my ear, and you've got to get revenge for me, and that's why I'm haunting the earth, is because I was murdered. And some of the things, many scholars say it's the ghost. The ghost is the key to the play. Okay? And it's really interesting because when it was first performed, Shakespeare himself played Hamlet. And many say it's the most difficult role to play, which Hamlet has 40% of the lines in this play, and so, how could it be harder to play than Hamlet? But that he is the key to the play, and that an Elizabethan audience would not necessarily believe it was a ghost of, they might believe it was a ghost of ill intent, and your priority was to find out if it really was a spirit, if it was a ghost, if they had a good intent, if they had a bad intent, and what they were about. And one of the reasons that the ghost is key is because the ghost is the only person in the entire play that Hamlet listens to besides himself. Many other people try to give him advice, to try to help him out, and he doesn't want to have anything to do with them. He only listens to the ghost. Now, maybe that's because the ghost has played into his belief system about his uncle being so horrid, and if he can prove it, if he can prove that the king is guilty, then he'll win the throne. So he wants to believe the ghost. And what the ghost tells him is true, but does that mean he's a ghost of ill intent or of good intent? And so that's very important to look at, and it changes the whole dynamics of how you read the play when you look at it that way. Look at the process that he goes through in those first few scenes as he sees the ghost and then he sees the ghost again, and exactly what words they exchange, and all of that is very, very key. Now, Leo Tolstoy hated Shakespeare. He wrote an essay on it, and he said that that Shakespeare had a bad influence, and he especially hated like King Lear, and then later on George Orwell did a counter essay argument countering Leo Tolstoy, and what Orwell said I think is super important for understanding one of the major importances of Hamlet, and that is that Leo Tolstoy's grievance, Orwell says, is basically that it's the argument between religion and humanism. That Shakespeare is humanist, and Hamlet is especially very humanist, and exalts reason and thought and scientific method and the individual above the religious. So take that into account. Look for that. Think about that. And because, you know, it's interesting, I talked about this a little bit in A Doll's House, and these would be interesting places to read together, as this idea of, first the idea of democracy and all men being created equal, and then this march towards individualism that has exalted the individual above everything, and the role that humanism has played in that, and all of that kind of thing, is very important. And what's happening in Hamlet is that we are seeing into a human soul. Plays were not done this way before, much before Shakespeare. They were kind of starting to be done this way, but Hamlet blows the top off of it. I mean, Shakespeare's other plays are about real personalities and real people that make real mistakes and all that kind of important stuff that I've talked about in other Shakespeare reviews. But Hamlet especially is about the individual is all, and the self, the ever-growing sense of self that Hamlet exhibits, and his inner consciousness, and he's got like 5 or 6 monologues or something. I mean, he spends a whole bunch of the play just talking to the audience, which is really talking to himself. And one of the things that Harold Bloom says about this play is that one of the most important things it can teach us is the ability to gain the skill of self-overhearing, is how he says it. And that all great literature helps us gain the ability to overhear ourselves better, to know ourselves better, to listen to what it is we're really about and what it is we're really saying and what it is we really mean. And Hamlet talks to himself all throughout this play, and he helps you understand the quandaries that he's in with the new dynamics that have been added to the situation and complicated his circumstances, and what options has he really got, and who is he really inside, and this whole idea of, you know, should I continue to live, and what is life for, and what am I really to do, and is seeking revenge legitimate, and how do I go about that? All the things that he talks to himself about, and all of the options that he entertains. And so self-overhearing is this really important element of this play. And I would say that if you're going to read Hamlet and you really want to have a fantastic experience and you really want to dig deep, then get for sure How to Read and Why by Harold Bloom. He's got a section in here on Hamlet that's really going to help you. And then, of course, get your Asimov's Guide to Shakespeare and read through that section on Hamlet. And there's some key places where Asimov and Bloom agree. Now, they're both very good humanists. And they see the role that this has played in Western thought to march forward the ideas of humanism and individualism through this idea of the self-conscious and the self-overhearing and the importance of one person and the power of one person to change everything, and us listening to ourselves and being real human beings and being individuals. It's just so, if you don't really understand Elizabethan times, it's hard to appreciate how revolutionary this was, because it was all about the group, about the religious, about God and what was higher, and mysticism, and of course this aristocratic model and an aristocratic society where the elite were what mattered, and when you were poor you didn't matter at all. all these ideas are new and revolutionary. Let me read you what Bloom says. All that matters in the play is the scandalous, ever-expanding circumference of Hamlet's consciousness. So think about that when you're reading through this. He says we will all become Hamlet at some point, and that Hamlet does some bad stuff, but we still love him. And he's very different than like an Iago from Othello, that he does bad stuff and we hate him for it. And to look really closely at what's the difference between how we feel about Othello and how we feel about Hamlet, and why? Why do we feel differently about them? Another thing I love that Bloom brings up is that Hamlet is a genius at character analysis, and he'll help us in that skill. He'll help us in understanding human nature and looking for cues. He can tell right away that Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are not genuine, and he takes his cues from very small replies that they give and just a few things that they say. And how is he so intuitive that way? And how does he know? And how is he that kind of a genius? He is a genius. He's in some scholars' minds the genius. And what makes him such a genius if he just kind of fumbles and is rash and you know, it's this really interesting quandary between having thought everything through and then taking really rash action. And when do we do that, and why do we do that? But one of the things about the character analysis is that he questions the characters, and through questioning them, through the play that he performs for the existing king, through things that he says and ways that he behaves, he comes to truly understand and expose each character to us, and he's right every time. He helps us see who they really are, and that will help us understand the people that are around us and how to better question them and how to better understand them and how to work within the bounds of who they really are and to no longer be deceived. So it's got all these layers and this incredible genius and so many things that it can teach us and do for us, and you could talk about it forever and never be done, and you could read it a million times and find more in it. He comes back in the last act, Act 5, as a new man, a different man, and he says something really profound about, I'm no longer going to think I'm just going to let things happen. And what does that mean? And why does he say that? And when is that true in our lives? Should we think things through? Of course we should. And how do we come to decisions? And he feels like, almost like he's been fighting life and he doesn't want to fight anymore. And I have felt that way so many times, that I'm fighting and then I don't want to fight anymore. So anyway, I could just go on and on for you. There's a million quotes. There's the kind of just look for parenting skills and principles. Look at Polonius and as a father, look at the Ghost as a father figure. Look at his mother. Look at the sibling relationships. Look at the courtship between him and Ophelia. It just there's so many themes, so many symbols, so many quotes, so many gems, and just an inexhaustible source of thought and pondering and reflection and learning. So that's why Hamlet is it. For so many individuals, there's virtually nothing to compare it to aside from some other Shakespeare, maybe some of the epic poetry. Of course, the Bible stands supreme as just developing and creating our Western culture. But that is Hamlet by William Shakespeare. I hope that has been helpful. I'll put up some of the things that you could read with it and some of the books that I recommend and some good sources online. Of course, follow the pattern for reading Shakespeare. Always read the plot, watch the play, do your Asimov, then read the play, and there's reading skills posted up to help you with that as well. But enjoy it. I hope that you'll tackle it sometime and maybe just read a little bit of it, maybe just watch a little bit of it. Tackle it in your book club or whatever, because it is something that you should know. It is something that you should read because of its great impact on our culture and because of what it can do for you personally. Thanks for watching. Pass this on if it was helpful, and we'll see you next time.